Grandpa Joe, sir, shouted Mr. Wonka. Kindly jet yourself over to the far corner of the elevator there and turn that handle. It lowers the rope. A rope's no good, Mr. Wonka. The Knids will bite through a rope in 1 second. It's a steel rope. It's made out of and scorched steel. If they try to bite through that, their teeth will splinter. To your buttons, Charlie. We've got to help me maneuver. We're going right over there to the top of the transport capsule, and then we'll try to hook onto it somewhere and get a firm hold. Like a battleship going into action, the great glass elevator with booster rockets firing moved smoothly in over the top of the enormous transport capsule. The commits immediately stopped attacking the capsule and went for the elevator. Squadron after squadron of giant Ramicious Knids flung themselves furiously at Mr. Wonka's marvelous machine. The noise was thunderous and terrible. The elevator was tossed about the sky like a leaf, and inside it, Grandma Georgina, Grandma Josephine, and Grandma George, floating in their nightshirts, were all screaming and yowling and screeching and flapping their arms and calling for help. Mrs. Bucket had wrapped her arms around Mr. Bucket and was clasping him so tightly that one of his shirt buttons actually punctured his skin. Charlie and Mr. Wonka, as cool as 2 cubes of ice, were up near the ceiling working the booster rocking controls, and Grandpa Joe, shouting war cries and throwing curses at the Knids, was down below turning the handle that unwound the steel rope. At the same time, he was watching the rope through the glass floor of the elevator. Starboard a bit, Charlie, shouted Grandpa Joe. We're right on top of him now. Follow a couple of yards, Mr. Wonka. I'm trying to get the hooked around that stumpy thing sticking out in front of there. Hold on. I've got it, that's it. Forward a little now and see if it holds. More. The big steel rope tightened. It held. And now, wonder of wonders, with their booster rockets blazing, the elevator began to tow the huge transport capsule forward and away. Full speed ahead, shouted Grandpa Joe. She's gonna hold. She's holding fine. All boosters firing, cried Mr. Wonka. You did a brilliant job under heavy fire. Grandpa Joe blew himself upward and hovered beside Charlie, bubbling with excitement. Charlie, my boy, we've been through a few funny things together lately, but never, ever anything like this. Grandpa, where are the Knids? They've suddenly all vanished. Everyone looked around. The only Knid in sight was their old friend, was the purple behind, still cruising along. Just a minute. What's that I see over there? Again still looked. And this time, sure enough, away in the distance, in the deep blue sky of outer space, they saw a massive cloud of Ramicious Knids, wheeling and circling like a fleet of bombers. If you think we're out of the woods yet, you're crazy, shouted Grandma Joe. I fear no Knids. We've got them beaten now. Poppy rot and pigwash, said Grandma Josephine. Any moment now they'll be at us again. Look at 'em. They're coming in. They're coming closer. This was true. The huge fleet of Knids had moved in at incredible speed and was now flying level with the great glass elevator. A couple of 100 yards away on the right-hand side, the only one with the bump on its rear end was much closer, only 20 yards away on the same side. It's changing shape. What's it gonna do? It's getting longer and longer. And indeed it was. The mammoth egg-shaped body was slowly stretching, becoming longer and longer and thinner until the end of it looked exactly like a long, screamy green serpent, as thick as a thick tree and as long as a football pitch. At the front end were the eyes, big and white with red centers. At the back, a kind of tapering tail, and at the very, very end of the tail was the enormous red, round, swollen bump it had got when it crashed against the glass. The people floating inside the elevator watched and waited. They saw the long rope-like Knid turning and coming straight for them. Now it actually began wrapping them around the elevator itself. It's tying us up like a parcel, yelled Grandma Georgina. Bunk 'em, cried Mr. Wonka. It's gonna crush us in its coils, wailed Grandma Georgina. Never, cried Mr. Wonka. Oh, get that beastly squishing thing away from me, shouted Grandma Georgina. Having curled its body twice around the elevator, the Knid now proceeded to tie a knot with its two ends, a good strong knot, left over right, then right over left. While all this was going on, nobody had noticed what the other Canadians were up to. Mr. Wonka, look at the others. What are they doing? What indeed? These two had all changed shape and had become much longer, but not nearly so as long or so as thin as the first one. Each of them had turned itself into a kind of thick rod, and the rod was curled around at both ends, at the tail end and at the head end, so that it made a double-ended hook. And now all the hooks were lining up into one long chain, 1,000 canades, all joining together and curving around in the sky to make a chain of canades half a mile long or more. And the canade at the very front of the chain, whose front hook was not, of course, hooked up to anything, was leading them in a wide circle and sweeping in towards the great glass elevator. Hey, they're gonna hook us up and tow us away. To the planet Worms, gasped Grandma Georgina. 18,427 million miles from here. They can't do that. We're doing the towing around here. They're gonna link up, Mr. Wonka. Can we stop them? I'm scared, Mr. Wonka. Do something, you old fool, shrieked Grandma Georgina. Don't just float about there looking at them. I must admit, said Mr. Wonka, that for once in my life I find myself at a bit of a loss. They all stared in horror through the glass at the long chain of nids. The leader of the chain was coming closer and closer. The hook, with two big angry eyes on it, was out and ready. I want to go home. Why can't we all go home? Great thundering tomcats. Home is right. What on earth am I thinking of? Come on, Charlie, quick, re-entry. The yellow button. Press it for all you're worth. I'll handle this lot. Hold your hats. Grab your gizzards. We're going down. Rockets starts firing out of the elevator from all sides. It tilted and gave a sickening lurch and then plunged down into the Earth's atmosphere at a simply colossal speed. Retro rockets. I mustn't forget to fire the retro rockets. He flew over to another series of buttons and started playing them like a piano. How's the tow rope holding, Grandpa? They're still with us, Mr. Wonka, sir? The rope is holding fine. It was an amazing sight, the great glass elevator streaking down towards the earth with the huge transport capsule in the tow beneath it. But the long chain of grenades was coming after them as well, following them down, keeping pace with them easily. We're too late, screamed Grandma Georgina. They're going to link us up and haul us back. I think not, said Mr. Wonka. Don't you remember what happens when a canid enters the Earth's atmosphere? He gets red hot. As they streaked downwards, sparks began to fly off the sides of the elevator. The elevator grew pink, then red, then scarlet. Sparks also began to fly on the long chain of canades, and the leading canade in the chains started to shine like a red-hot poker. So did all the others. So did this great slimy brute coiled around the elevator itself. This one, in fact, was trying frantically to uncoil itself and get away, but it was having a bit of trouble untying the knot. In another 10 seconds, it began to sizzle. Inside the elevator, they could literally hear it sizzling. It made a noise like bacon frying, and exactly the same sort of thing was happening to the other ones. They're shooting canades, cried Charlie. What a splendid sight. It's better than fireworks. They've all been roasted to a crisp. They've been frizzled to a fritter. We're saved. What do you mean, saved? We'll be frizzled ourselves. Have no fears, dear lady. My elevator is air-conditioned, ventilated, aerated, and automated in every possible way. We're going to be all right. I haven't the faintest idea of what's been going on, said Mrs. Bucket, making one of her rare speeches. But whatever it is, I do not like it. Aren't you enjoying it, Mother? No, she said, I am not. And where's your father? What a great sight it is. Just look at the earth down there, Charlie, getting bigger and bigger. And it's going to meet it in 2,000 miles an hour, groaned Grandma Georgina. How are you going to slow down, you old fool? You didn't think of that one, did you? Oh, he's got parachutes. I'll bet he's got great big parachutes that open up just before we hit. Parachutes, said Mr. Wonka with contempt. Parachutes are only for astronauts and Sissy. And anyways, we don't want to slow down. We want to speed up. I told you already, we're going to be going at a tremendous speed when we punch through the roof. What about the transport capsule? We'll be letting them go in a few seconds now. They do have parachutes. Grandpa Joe, sir, throw out the rope. Let it go. They'll be alright now, so as their parachutes are working. Rope gone, called out Grandpa Joe. It won't be long now. We shall soon know whether if we are dead or alive. I have to concentrate awfully hard, otherwise we'll come down in the wrong place. They plunged into a thick bank of cloud, and for 10 seconds they could see nothing. When they came out of the cloud, the transport capsule had disappeared, and the earth was very close, and there was only a great spurt of land beneath them, with mountains, then fields and trees, then a small town. There it is, shouted Mr. Wonka. My chocolate factory. My great chocolate factory. You mean Charlie's chocolate factory, said Grandpa Joe. That's right, said Mr. Wonka, addressing Charlie. I clean forgotten. I do apologize. Through the glass floor of the elevator, Charlie caught a quick glimpse of the huge red roof and the tall chimneys of the giant factory. They were plunging straight down on it. Hold your breath. Hold your nose. Fasten your seatbelt and say your prayers. We're going through the roof. Then the noise of splintering wood and broken glass and absolute darkness and the most awful crunching sounds as the elevator rushed on and on, smashing everything before it. All at once the crashing noises stopped, and the ride became much smoother, and the elevator seemed to be traveling along guides or rails, twisting and turning like a roller coaster. And when the lights came on, Charlie suddenly realized that for the last few seconds he hadn't been floating at all. He'd been standing normally on the floor. Everyone was on the floor, actually. We're through, yelled Mr. Wonka. We've done it. We're in. Well done, sir. How splendid. What a magnificent job. Where in the world are we now? We're back, Mother. We're in the chocolate factory. I'm very glad to hear it. But don't you think we've come a rather long way round? Oh, we had to, said Mr. Wonka, to avoid the traffic. I have never met a man who talks so much absolute nonsense. A little nonsense now and then is relished by the wisest men. Why don't you pay some attention to where this thing is going, and stop fiddling about? A little fiddling round about will stop you from going up the spout. What did I tell you? Said Grandma Georgina. He's round the twist. He's bogged as a beetle. He's dotty as a dingbat. He's got rats in the roof. I want to go home. Too late. We're there. The elevator stopped. The doors opened, and Charlie found himself looking out once again at the great chocolate room, with the chocolate river and the chocolate waterfall where everything was edible. Who in the world was all those peculiar men? Grandma Georgina shouted. They're Oompa Loompas. They're wonderful. You'll love them. Shh, said Grandpa Joe. Listen, Charlie. The drums are starting up. Alleluia, sang the Oompa Loompas. Oh, alleluia and hooray. Our Willy Wonka's back today. We thought you'd never make it home. We thought you left us all alone. We knew that you would have to face some frightful creatures up in space. We even thought we heard the crunch of someone eating you for lunch. All right, all right. Thank you for your welcome. Will some of you please help me get this bed out of here? 50 Oompa Loompas ran forward and pushed the bed with the 3 old ones in it out of the elevator. Mr. Wonka and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket, both looking completely overwhelmed by it all, followed the bed out. Now, up you hop out of that bed and let's get cracking. I'm sure you all want to lend a hand running the factory. Who, us? Said Grandma Georgina. Yes, you. You must be joking. I'd never joke. Now you listen to me, sir, said Grandpa George, sitting up straight in bed. You got us through quite enough tumbles and trumbles for one day. I've gotten you out of them, too, said Mr. Wonka proudly. And I'm going to get you out of that bed if it's the last thing I do.